Hello, friends, and welcome to another health seminar. We are happy that you can join us in person and those watching online as well. Before we begin, I would like to just tell you a little bit about who we are if this is your first time with us or your first time watching. The Elmhurst Community Lifestyle Center, our goal is to minister to you and to nurture the physical, the mental, and the spiritual needs of our communities. And we want you to know that we are here. We are hoping to be a support for you, whether it be through cooking classes. We have disease prevention seminars throughout the year. And so this is a little bit about who we are. And tonight we have Walt Cross with us, and we're very excited. He'll be presented on heart disease and diabetes. And Walt is, if you don't know who Walt is, a little bit about him. He traveled all the way from Tennessee to be with us here tonight. And he serves there with his family in a ministry called the Mustard Seed. And they serve their community by providing also different classes, consultations, lectures. They have a health food store. Officially, Walt has education in healthcare administration. So he's done that side of the medical world, and he's transitioned into more proactive, seeking the root causes of diseases. And so he's got a wealth of information to share with us. And we've been blessed last night with a lecture on the immune system support, and we'll be blessed today as well. So we're glad you're joining us. And before we begin, if we could just ask for God's blessing. If you can bow your heads, we'll pray real quick. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for another opportunity to hear more about health and the ways that we can improve it, Lord. We thank you for each person that is able to join us tonight. We pray that you may bless the speaker, bless each person who is listening. You know the ailments and the illnesses, the problems we're struggling with. And we pray that whatever we may learn today, that we may be able to apply it in our lives, and that we may live healthfully and give glory to you through everything. We thank you. In Jesus' name, amen. Without further ado, I'm going to present Walt Cross to you, and stay tuned till the end. We'll have a Q&A, so save your questions. All right.
Good afternoon, y'all. I'd like to start with diabetes. As I mentioned earlier, when I first started working in healthcare, we didn't think you could reverse diabetes. And actually, a little over 20 years ago, when I left regular healthcare, and I told corporate that I was going to go do a type of work that could reverse diabetes, they told me I was crazy. And I said, you can even improve type 1 diabetes. And they told me I was stupid. I went to a clinic that we had over a 98% reversal rate of type 2 diabetes and a significant reduction in type 1 diabetes. So why is it you go from your first 20 years with zero care plan that said reversing diabetes is only diabetic management through pharmaceuticals, then to a plan of care that said diabetic reversal? How do you do that? Well, the problem is, as we just talked in this last program, is understanding the physiology. The key is understanding how the body works and what causes the problem. The cure is in the cause. When you take the cause away, then the body starts working as it should. So as we look at, let's talk about type 2 diabetes first. So in type 2 diabetes, what's happening there is when we have trillions of cells, as we talked this morning, as we talked about Daniel, a little fellow that came up and helped me this morning. Our body has trillions of cells, and around the cells, there's something called an insulin receptor. And that little insulin receptor is around the cells, and it has a little door that opens and allows glucose to come in. And insulin opens the door and allows the glucose to go from the blood into the cell. And everybody's happy. Everything works fine until three things that I have found that can happen. Now, there could be more. I've only found three. One is if the cell gets too big, the door doesn't open right. Have you ever in the wintertime gone and tried to open a window or a door and it's swollen and it doesn't open right? Well, what happens is when the cell gets too big, this door just doesn't open right. And it's called insulin resistance. Insulin resistance. And so what happens is you don't have adequate glucose going from the blood into the cell, and so cell glucose goes down. And so the brain tells the pancreas, produce more door openers, more insulin. And so now your blood insulin level goes up, trying to muscle this door open and to get the glucose from the blood into the cell. The second thing that happens. The second thing that happens is when there's too much fat, it clogs the door. I don't know what y'all eat here, but where I am from, and right now we have listeners from home and Newport, Tennessee, and all around that are watching us on our Facebook. Where I'm from, we fry everything: maters, taters, ice cream, pickles, cheese. We just fry chickens. Okra, poke. If we can fry it, we fry it. And if we don't fry it, we pour oil in it. Not healthy. And so when you have too much fat, the door just doesn't open right. The third major cause that I found is inflammation. Harvard University says that the number one cause of inflammation in the body is due to refined foods. Harvard University says the number one cause of inflammation in the United States today is due to us eating refined foods, processed foods. Do folks eat processed foods around here? And they do in the South. As I mentioned last night, Tennessee in 1969 was the fourth healthiest state in the United States. In 1969, Tennessee was the fourth healthiest state in the United States. In 2009, we were the fourth unhealthiest state. And what happened? The way we started eating, what we started drinking, our exercise, and you'll get this is interesting, the lack of nursing children, according to Nashville. Number one cause of inflammation, processed foods, what we're eating. When I went out to eat in 1969, it was going to grandma's house. We didn't go out to eat at a restaurant. Couldn't afford, nor were there restaurants around our area up on the mountain. Or even down in the little city. There was one restaurant, but it wasn't your typical fast food restaurant. The next major cause of inflammation is, according to Harvard, is sleep deprivation. And sleep deprivation is huge out there today. When Marilyn and I when we first opened the store, the biggest things we dealt with was hormone imbalance and stress. Today, it is sleep deprivation. Yes, we still deal with stress. We still deal with hormone imbalance. But as Walter and Marilyn and I, as we work with folks, sleep deprivation is huge. It's huge. Harvard says that we need to have at least 7 hours sleep at night. It used to say less than 6 hours sleep deprivation. Now Harvard says less than 7, but I expect that to change soon as I continue to read Harvard. And Harvard's flirting with 8 hours. They keep talking about the advantage of 8 hours over 7 hours. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see that number change from sleep deprivation up to 8 hours. We saw that change in the Breslov-Belloc study, which was the Alameda County study. Was 6,900 people over a 15-year period. At first, the study over 9 years showed 7 years, but when they went into 15 years, it said, no, really, you need 8 hours sleep. But the problem is not just 8 hours sleep. The other problem is what time are you going to bed? Because Harvard and others are finding that if you go to bed at 9, it makes a significant difference in your brain's flushing of toxins, of the body's, you're taking short-term memory, putting it to long-term memory, the growth memory hormones, the growth hormones, the organs do their kind of rehab during that time. The hours before midnight, we're told, are worth twice the hours after midnight. So it's the time at which you go to sleep. But it's not only just you get 8 hours, but it's not just only the time you go to sleep, but it's the quality of sleep. Are people staying asleep? Are they getting up to go to the bathroom 4 or 5 times, 6 times at night because they have prostate problems? Or are they going to bed, but they wake up at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock and can't fall asleep because they're worrying about the kids or their finances? Or they're waking up because they have sleep apnea. They're not getting that good sleep during and getting that good REM sleep. You need quality sleep. And so that's another thing that causes that door not to open, causing inflammation. Dehydration causes inflammation. And dehydration, I got a guy that I know, he doesn't drink any water. He says water rusts pipes. He doesn't want to rust his body, so he drinks Pepsi. He doesn't drink water. I've known this guy for 16 years, and I'm with him a lot. I've only seen him drink water once. And people say, I just don't do water. I don't want to drink water. Well, it's more than just drinking water. It's how much are you drinking at a time? Are you just drinking a whole bunch, go, and it causes what's called free flow? Anything over 3 to 5 ounces, we see free flow, and we don't have good saturation. So we need to take a sip, maybe 3-4 sips, or mouthfuls, 3 to 4 mouthfuls every 30 minutes. And you're going to have good saturation if you do that. Yes, 15 minutes before the meal, during the meal, to an hour after a meal, you don't want to drink because that affects digestion. But the rest of the time, you need to be sipping on your water. Dehydration will cause inflammation. Another thing which will cause inflammation is stress. Anybody got stress? Number 1 diagnosis in America today. World Health Organization says we'll soon pass it by depression. But number 1 right now in America is stress. Stress is huge. What are we stressed about? We're stressed about COVID. We're stressed about finances. We're stressed about not having a job. I can tell you people are very stressed in my community right now if we have another lockdown. People have businesses. Yes, some didn't make it. Some closed their businesses. They went under the first lockdown. There's folks that did make it, they stay at home. If they have another lockdown, they ain't going to make it. And they're not sure how to take care of the family. Is that stress? Absolutely, it's stress. There's stress with the kids. There's stress with health. There's many causes of stress out there today. Work, family relations. Stress causes inflammation. So what do we do? There's a fellow back in 1933. He's German. He was a medical doctor. He was a scientist. He was both trained as a physician and a scientist. And he came to America, to Duke University. In 1934, he started doing some research. He thought he was leaving Germany. He really didn't want to leave. But he thought it was just, this was just a little uprising, but it wouldn't make anything. And he really wanted to go on back home to Germany. But he ended up staying. He was Jewish. It's a good thing he stayed. It did end up being something. His name was Walter Kempner. And Dr. Kempner put together a program at Duke University that is amazing. And I like using his program because it's very effective. And they're still using it at Duke today. It's very expensive if you went there. The program that I'm going to share with you is extremely expensive. But it's very cheap for you to do at home. This past February, I went to Africa. A lady came in. She had type 2 diabetes. Her blood sugar was 399. She was on insulin. She was on metformin. And in 14 days, she was off her insulin, off her metformin, and her blood sugar was 115. Last year, I went. There was a lady, hers was this one was, let's see here. It was this one was 399. The one last year was 389, 10 points below. And again on insulin, again on metformin, and in 14 days, she was at 124, no medication. That's fast. Now, I didn't reverse in that amount of time. We were managing it through diet, and I don't want to manage. I want to plumb get rid of it. So how do you get rid of it? You got to take care of those 3 problems. As I talked the other day, if you have a piece of sandpaper and you're rubbing your arm, and you're rubbing a hole in it, and you go and put medicine on it, and you say, "Oh, thank you," and then when they leave, you go rubbing it again, and then they come back and they put more medicine, and they leave, and you go back. Is it going to heal? Not till you stop this. Not till you stop the cause. So we got to stop those 3 causes. So the cell gets too large. Kempner found if you shrink the cell, it starts working again. How do you shrink the cell? Come into ideal body weight. But you don't want to come into a BMI of 24. You want to come to a BMI of 23. You don't want to be flirting with just, you're still within normal ideal body weight, but you're just one Thanksgiving, one Christmas, one birthday, one cruise, well, not cruises right now, but you're just one whatever from being into the overweight. So Duke said, let's drop down into a 23, and that's exactly what Agatha Thrash said. Don't go to 24, go to 23. And when you have that Thanksgiving meal, that birthday meal, you jump up to 24, you're still in ideal body weight. You're still in the green zone. It's a safety net, and you can lose back down. And so what Kempner did is he had his patients lose their weight down to where the door starts opening again. For too much fat, who's ever used a concrete machine to do concrete work that you pull behind a pickup truck? Anybody ever done that? Anybody? You got this concrete machine, you throw in your sand and your gravel or your Sackcrete or whatever, and you put it in your water, and it turns and it makes concrete. And you're making, you're putting a new foundation around the house and whatever. At the end of the day, you didn't finish. Do you just leave the concrete in it? No, you got to empty it out. But do you wash it out with concrete? No, you wash it out with water. So what Kempner did is he says, don't use any oil. Just the same thing Pritikin did. Just the same thing as Ornish did. Don't use oil. And so on an oil-free diet, well, avocado or olives, but no other oils or nuts. No fats like that. And if you clean it out, you'll wash it out. There's an analogy I use back home that I grew up as a young boy on a farm and then grew up on a lot being with equipment, farm equipment. And if you have let's say your drawbar, and you've got your drawbar, you've got your three-point hitch on the very top where on the top you can crank it and move your plow or whatever. And after a while you get so much grease, it just doesn't turn good. And so what you do is you take it apart and you wash it in gasoline. And you clean it all up and get all that old grease off of it. And then you put it back together and grease it again, it's going to turn real good. Well, what Kempner found was, if you go to a diet that has no oil and no fats, like meat fats and nut fats, then it's going to clean that receptor and it's going to start working again. And then where he found was where you have inflammation from the refined foods, the processed foods, or the dehydration, the stress, or the sleep deprivation, take those away. No refined food. Go to bed at 9 o'clock. So patients went to bed at 9 o'clock with Kempner. He had them drink plenty of water. He had them exercise. He worked on the stress. And all of a sudden, the door starts working again. And the diabetes went away. So what do you do? There's different ways of doing it, and so I'll share different ways. It's not a cookie cutter. And I can tell you that what you need to do is pray. You want compliance. You want the person to get better. And so it's not going to do any good giving them a plan that they're not going to do. And how do you determine that? Well, yes, you do a history. You talk to them. You find out what their life, kind of get an idea of what they're willing to do. But what do you think really tells you what they need to do? You pray. You pray and ask God, what do I need to offer this person? Do I need to offer them the whole thing? Do I need to let them make a decision? Or do I just need to say, do this part, because you know the other part's going to scare them to death? Pray. I have a friend. He's a surgeon in Washington, D.C., good friend of mine. We talk usually once a day, many times, sometimes 4 times a day. We used to work together. And if you ask him, if a patient comes to him, he now does lifestyle medicine. And if a patient goes to him with hypertension, and you'd say, well, Doc, what are you going to do? You know what he'd tell you today? I don't know. He has no idea what he's going to do. He stops and he prays. And he asks God, how do I need to treat this patient? Because God knows that person's propensities. He knows that person's character. He knows that person's financial abilities. He knows what's the stressors or the challenges at home, at work, or whatever. And he asks God to help him make a plan for that person. And I found it works. It really does. But let me share with you what we do. And then you can pick or choose or whatever. The first thing we do is we'll do a 3-day water fast. But Walt, you can't do that. They're diabetics. I remember when I went to the clinic and they only served breakfast and dinner. Now, dinner's what meal at my house? The noon meal. So they only served breakfast and dinner, no supper, no mid-morning snack, no afternoon snack, no HS snack. And so I went into the docs and I said, guys, you can't do this. I'm the director of the clinic. You can't do this. You know, this is a problem. And they decided to play with me. Why? Why can't we do this? I said, it's the standard of practice. This is what the American Dietetic Association says. And then they asked me one more question, and I left. They asked me, how many diabetics did you reverse where you come from? 0 in 20 years. And then I learned from Dr. Agatha Thrash that, yeah, that's the way you do it. You actually can, if you extend the fast from supper to breakfast to dinner to breakfast, it reverses the diabetes even more effectively. And then she told me, she said, Walt, I called her one time, I said, Dr. Agatha, I've got this lady, she's in that 1 point something%. We can't get her type 2 to reverse. What do I need to do? She said, faster for a water fast for 5 days. A type 2 water fast for 5 days? She says, it's okay, Walt. How do I do it? And so she shared with me how to do it. So then we went, for everybody who came, we do a 3-day water fast. These folks in Africa that we do diabetes reversal, we do a 3-day water fast. And people go, well, with diabetes, your blood sugar drops, it goes high. Low blood sugar is not diabetes. Low blood sugar is you took too much medicine for the amount of food you ate, or you didn't eat enough food for the amount of medication you took. Is that right, Doc? And so when a person bottoms out, it's because either they didn't eat enough food or they took too much medicine for the amount of food they took. Example, almost 2 years ago, one of our firemen got up one morning, and he's type 2 diabetic, and he got up, he took his insulin for the day, but he didn't take time to eat breakfast. He was scurrying around doing whatever, and then when it came time to eat dinner, the noon meal, he didn't eat dinner. And then he decided to go somewhere on his side-by-side, his little, Polaris thing. He passed out and drove off the side of the mountain and almost killed him. Did the diabetes make him bottom out? What made him bottom out is the medication he took without eating food to bring it back up. See, diabetes is high glucose. Medicine pushes you back into range based on the food that you're eating. If you don't eat that amount of food, you eat less, the medicine pushes you lower. If you eat more food, like an extra donut or two, it's going to go up. Do you see? It's a regulator. So when you fast for 3 days, that means you have no food, so it means you use less or maybe even no insulin during that time. You monitor it. It's kind of like driving a stick shift. You let out the clutch and you push the gas. You remember the first time. Walter's probably watching. I remember the first time Walter drove the pickup truck. He loaded it up full of wood. left the tailgate down, took off, and he left about all the wood and back on the ground because he let the clutch out too much. I did it. Didn't y'all do it when you drove stick shift for the first time? Remember driving a tractor for the first time? Boof, boof. Or a car or a truck? So you've got to learn how to do this. If you know how to slide and scale, it's a whole lot easier because you already know how to adjust that medication based on the amount of food you're eating. But let's say you don't feel comfortable doing that. Then don't do a fast. That's okay. The next thing we do is we'll do a juice fast. And in the juice fast, we'll do anywhere between 21 days and 60 days. But Walt, you can't drink juice. Remember, juice has a lot of fructose in it. No, use vegetable juice. And then if you use fruit, use apple, Granny Smith. And then make that juice. 16 ounces for breakfast, 16 ounces for dinner, 16 ounces for supper. But Walt, you're mixing fruits and vegetables. Well, yes, I asked Dr. Thrash that question. It is true that when you eat fruits and vegetables with fiber, that she said it caused a tornado in the stomach. Because the fruit digested first, you can have some fermentation or whatever, and it causes problems in digestion. But she said when you pull the fiber out, remember, fiber makes food time released. Blood sugar's low. And so you want to pop it back up. Do you eat an apple or do you drink the apple juice? You pull the fiber out and you take the juice, it's going to get in a lot faster, and so you drink the apple juice. So what happens there is when you pull the fiber out of the fruit and out of the vegetables, that juice is going to be in the blood, it's going to be in the system, not 2.5, 3 hours later. It's going to be in the blood within 15, 20 minutes at the most. So you don't have time for that fermentation. So you can mix the fruits and vegetables, and it's going to be fine. It's not going to cause the tornado in the stomach. But if you do use fruit, use the apple. And if you use the apple for diabetes, use a Granny Smith because it has a lower glycemic index. And we do that for 20 to 60 days. The next step is we'll have folks just eat raw fruit for breakfast. And for dinner, a nice big old salad. But no dressing, no oil, no salt, no cheese, no meat. They can squeeze some lemon juice on it or maybe some salsa, low sodium salsa, and we'll have them be on that for a little while. And then we go to Dr. Kempner's diet. And Kempner's diet is 1 cup of brown rice for breakfast and 3 fruit. 3 servings of fruit. And a serving is each, apple, orange, pear, whatever. Or a half a cup of little stuff, or a half a cup of big stuff. And that was going fine until I went to Africa. And those people didn't want just 3 servings. They wanted 6 types of fruit. Not a problem. Do a half a serving per fruit. So they got a half of orange, half of mango, or half a serving of tree tomatoes. Who's had tree tomatoes? Where's our fella from? Y'all have had tree tomatoes? Now, did you have them in Brazil? Colombia. Oh, okay. They're about this big around, and I'd never had anything like them. I mean, it was a taste that I'd never had before. And so they had 6 servings, but only half servings of each. So it still added up to be 3 servings. Again, if it's little stuff, it's a half a cup of strawberries, blueberries, raspberries, or a half a cup of pineapple. So however you do it, 3 servings of fruit. That's for breakfast. 1 cup of brown rice. That's your protein. And then your fruit. And then for dinner, the noon meal, is 1 cup of brown rice and a salad. Just a nice big old bowl of salad. Again, no dressing, no oil, no salt, no cheese, no meat. You can squeeze some lemon on it or maybe a little low-sodium salsa. Well, that didn't work in Africa either. But the Africa program worked. You got to figure out what works in whatever culture or wherever the person you're working with. Let me say this in parentheses, bold, red letters. It is not a cookie cutter. It's not a cookie cutter. It's individualized. One, by what God leads you to have done, what that person's going to do for compliance, what's available financially or whatever. And so in Africa, they had no interest where I was in salad, a bowl of salad. That was Greek. They didn't have any interest in that. So what they did is they put a cup of brown rice in the middle, and then they put the raw salad around the plate. It looked beautiful. It worked great. They enjoyed it. It's what they were used to, and it worked fine. For supper. Remember, we didn't do supper. Now, people will do intermittent fasting, and intermittent fasting is okay, but they've got it mixed up. See, when they think they need to do intermittent fasting, they're skipping breakfast. What's the problem there? One, y'all know Neil Nedley. Y'all have read his book, Proof Positive. In there, he says that when you skip breakfast, if you don't eat breakfast, a full breakfast, within 2 hours of awakening, you increase your risk of a heart attack or a stroke by 150% because of the platelets are thicker. Breakfast thins those platelets down. You're less prone to a heart attack and a stroke when you eat breakfast, a full breakfast. I'm not talking a coffee. I'm not talking a biscuit at Hardee's. I'm talking a good, healthy breakfast. That's the first thing. The other thing is when you eat breakfast is it increases the metabolism and you increase your calorie burn. When you eat dinner, you increase your metabolism. You increase your calorie burn. But then what Dr. Koop found, and Dr. Koop was this specialist around the world. He was the best in figuring out metabolism. Koop found that around 2:30 in the afternoon, 3 in the afternoon, for some reason, I believe God's turned our lights down to get us ready to sleep. Around 2:30, 3 in the afternoon, our metabolism starts shutting down, Koop said. And so when you eat supper, that food does not increase metabolism and it does not burn off the calories as effectively. There's something else that happens at 2:30 in the afternoon that I share for our doctor. I had a buddy of mine, he's internal medicine, and he called me not long ago and he said, Walt, he says, I learned something. He says, cancer doesn't transfer through the DNA, it's transferring through the mitochondria. And he said, we found in some research that around, if you don't eat after 2:30 in the afternoon, the mitochondria is a lot healthier. But if you eat after 2:30 in the afternoon, it affects the mitochondria and you're more prone to cancer. He said also, if you have cancer and you stop eating by 2:30 in the afternoon, the mitochondria can improve. And they're less prone to transfer the cancer. I said, that's interesting. I said, have you heard about Koop and his work with metabolism? He said, no. I said, something's going on at 2:33 in the afternoon. So I encourage people just to do the brown rice and fruit for breakfast, the brown rice and salad for dinner, and do nothing for supper. But you have those folks that say, I just can't do that. Well, then plan B is to have them to drink a juice. It's going to be in the blood within 15 minutes. Just drink a vegetable juice. Yes, ma'am. Pardon? A smoothie. A smoothie is going to have more fiber and it's going to take longer for digestion. And so it is an option, but if we're trying to lose the weight the fastest, we try to stop that supper meal. And also, and again, we're talking diabetes, because Thrash said if we extend that fast from supper to dinner, we just reverse it faster. Now, you're exactly right. It will work. And I do have people say, but Walt, what about a smoothie? And I can see in their eyes, they're not going to drink the juice. I say a smoothie will be fine. Because it's better that they drink the smoothie than to eat that big old supper. It's better that again, it's working with that person. What are they willing to do? It's not a cookie cutter. And it's better that they drink the smoothie than to fall off the wagon. You're exactly right. Yes. So that's the diet. And we stay on that diet, the Duke diet, until several things happen. They come into ideal body weight. And there's a fellow that was at Duke. He was on this program for 3.5 years. He was a big man. And it took a while to shrink that man down and get his body working right. And he ate this Duke diet, brown rice and fruit, brown rice and salad. That is all he ate for 3.5 years. But guess what? At the end, you wouldn't have even recognized him. He was very trim. He was well, he had worked on his muscles. He no longer had diabetes. His health was remarkable. So it can go longer. And I'll come to this part when I talk about cardiovascular disease. So you stay on the diet until you're at ideal body weight, until you have a normal A1C, and you have a normal fasting glucose, if it's diabetes specific. And then we go to step 2. Now, the first part, I call it the restoration diet, or the restoration program. You're out driving in the country, there's a farm out there, and in the field you see a 1957 Chevy. And you stop in and say, I like your Chevy. Have you ever thought of getting rid of it? Oh, that was my daddy's. That's an eyesore out there. Just, if you'll haul it off, you can have it. Whoa, a 1957? Yeah, it's got some rust on it. You got to grind the rust off. You got to put your Bondo on it, and your primer, and your sanding, and your paint, and redo the seats, and rebuild the engine. But once that car's back into prime, do you still use the grinder on it? No, you just do the maintenance program. And so once you reach that ideal body weight, you got a normal A1C, you got a normal A1C, you want the A1C below 5.6, you want that glucose below 100, then you're good. So then we go to Plan B. And Plan B is we go from Duke University to Cornell University. In Cornell University, Dr. T. Colin Campbell, who's watched Forks Over Knives? Who's seen the China study? Campbell is an amazing man. He's tremendous. I had him as a professor. And Campbell found that the best diet in the world is a whole food, plant-based diet with variety. Now again, as I mentioned last night maybe, if you just go plant-based, Fruit Loops are plant-based. Did you know that? Oreos are plant-based. Yeah. But you want whole food plant-based. But he said, don't just do whole food plant-based, because there's people out there who just do same-o, like dogs do, dog food, same-o. And when you look at food, it's like an orchestra. Has anybody ever played in an orchestra? You have. What do you play? The violin. So let's say you've got a violin, you've got a cello, and you have a trumpet. Do you have an orchestra? No. You've got a violin, a cello, and a trumpet. And what happens is when people eat same-o, just a small variety, they're not getting all the minerals and vitamins and that they need. See, a banana only has certain nutrients, and a sweet potato has only certain nutrients, and a mango only has certain nutrients, and papaya only has certain nutrients. And so you need a wide variety of nutrition. There was a physicist who was excellent in this. He actually had his wife have a different menu for every meal of the month. Never did they have the same menu twice in the same month, because he wanted variety in nutrition for his children, variety in vitamins, variety in minerals, variety in proteins, variety in carbohydrates, variety in the fats, so that it's a well-balanced diet. So Dr. Campbell says a whole food, plant-based diet with variety. And that's step 2. And then we have the people go to that diet. And according to Cornell University and Cambridge University, a person who eats that diet and does the rest of what I'm talking about, they live on average 15 years longer. And that's what I learned taking nutrition from Cornell. So that's the fuel. That's what we'd have for the fuel for reversing diabetes type 2. But it doesn't stop there. The next thing that we look at is hydration. You've got to have adequate hydration. And again, as we talked about before, we don't want to just go. We want to sip on it. We want about 4 ounces every 30 minutes. UC Davis, University of California at Davis, says it takes a half a gallon of water to run a 5-year-old. And from 5 years old up to 128 pounds is a half a gallon of water, 2 liters. Unless they do a lot more exercise. They're out working in the garden, they're running, whatever. And you can have an adult that's under the 128 pounds. If you're over 128 pounds, it's body weight divided by 2. That's the first rule. Body weight divided by 2, unless they're greatly obese, and there's another formula. But even at body weight divided by 2, that may not be enough. See, when I'm at home, the state of Tennessee tells me I'm supposed to drink a gallon of water a day because I might have to go into a house fire. And they want me to be hydrated to be able to do that. When I fight fire with the U.S. Forest Service, so Park Service, Walter and I are supposed to drink a gallon of water while we're fighting the fire every hour and a half. It used to be every 2 hours. Now they say every hour and a half. That's a lot of water. But we're sweating a lot. So dependent on your activity is, see, just body weight divided by 2, or if you're less than 128 pounds, a half a gallon, that's to sit on the couch. But if you're out working and sweating, you need more than amount. And again, remember, a swig, about 3 swigs to 4 swigs every half hour is amazing on hydrating the body. And well, let me just say, it's amazing. The next thing is exercise. Now, I noticed when I would sit down with our patients at 6 in the morning, and they would come, they get up, and they come down. I think I lost it. There we go. And they would come down, and I would check their glucose. And let's say it was 180, 190. I would have them go do a power walk for 30 minutes. They would come back, and it'd be in the 120, 130s. So I told this to a friend of mine, a buddy of mine at Loma Linda. He was a professor there. And he said, that's interesting. I saw him 2 years later. And he said, Walt, we did some research. And he says, we found that just a 20-minute power walk lowers the blood sugar more than 1 shot of insulin. Isn't that cool? Well, see, Kempner, Dr. Kempner at Duke University, this guy was a genius. He was doing this back in 1934. He was having his patients exercise 4 times a day. Now, which would you rather have? 2 shots of insulin a day or whatever you needed? Or would you rather exercise throughout the day and have 20 minutes of exercise 4 times a day, as Dr. Kempner at Duke University found? It's a whole lot better on your eyes. It's a whole lot better on your kidneys. It's a whole lot better on your whole body. And so exercising is critical in this program for reversing diabetes, if they can exercise. Now, what if they can't exercise? And I have people that can't exercise. I have people in wheelchairs. I have people that just can't exercise. So here's what I have them do. Help me out, y'all. I think this is okay. Okay, clap your hands. Stop. Do you feel the tingling? That's microcirculation. Have that person clap their hands. It will increase circulation. Or try this one. Rub your ears really hard. Rub them really good. Feel that? Or you can take and pat yourself. You can take a rolled up newspaper or magazine and don't bruise yourself, but hit on yourself. Several years ago, I was speaking on a radio station in New York, and I was sharing this. I was a weekly radio station, and the next week, this lady comes on, and she says, I have been bedbound for a long time. And she said, I heard you say last Friday evening to do this. I decided to do it after the program. She says, I felt so good, I got up, I started moving around, and she says, I'm up moving around now. Now, what did she do? She just got some circulation going, microcirculation. In China, in the mornings, men are known to rub their head. Now, some men mess up their hair more than others, but just rub their head is really good. As much as 30 minutes, these men in China rub their head. What are they doing? Increasing circulation. So we did this years ago in PT. When we had patients that were wheelchair bound, we would have them clap and that increased circulation. Well, this is even better, doing this other stuff. It increases circulation. And as that person can do a little bit, and a person says, well, I can't walk 20 minutes. Well, that's fine. If you can walk 5 minutes, that's 5 minutes. And then as they keep doing it, they may be able to do 6 minutes. And then they might be able to do 7 minutes. But you don't want to push them into exhaustion, or they're not going to do it anymore. Just push what they can do, what they can do. So the first thing is what? Nutrition. Number 2 is what? Hydration. Number 3 is exercise. Number 4 is going to bed by 9 o'clock. Going to bed by 9 o'clock is huge on the body resetting itself. We talked about the glymphatic system in the brain. The lymphatic system, it's called glymphatic system in the brain. We talked about the short-term memory to long-term memory. But it helps, actually Harvard found that when you don't go to bed early, it actually found the longer you stay up, the more you're prone to gain weight, not lose weight. One of the problems is you're up longer and you think you got to have more fuel, especially if you're watching TV. You think you got to have one of them pizzas. And so it's going to bed. Why does it get dark at night? Don't get too scientific on me. Why does it get dark at night? Because God made it that way. Why did God make it that way? He could have put 2 suns out there, but He made it that way so we would go to sleep. And Harvard is finding if we go to sleep by 9 o'clock, our bodies reset and run so much better. And the last item that I'll mention, and we'll have some question and answers. The last item is the most expensive thing I have, but it's the cheapest thing I have. And that's trusting God. It's the most expensive because Christ died for us. But it's the cheapest thing because He gave it to us. Everything I've told you so far does not reverse diabetes, does not heal you at all. Diet doesn't heal you. Exercise doesn't heal you. Drinking adequate water doesn't heal you. Going to sleep doesn't heal you. It is only God that heals you. You ask God to bless that meal. You ask God to bless that exercise. You ask God to bless that hydration. You ask God to bless that exercise. Just like you ask Him to bless the food every time you sit down. You thank Him for it. You ask Him to bless it. Because that apple does not keep you alive by itself. God blesses it. And we cannot forget where the power of healing comes from. And that's through God. So that's it on diabetes. Type 2, type 1 is the exact same thing. What we see is we see the glucose, but I don't fast a type 1 is usually, but what we see is we see a glucose in the 80s, the 60s, come to 5 usually units a day. I haven't figured out how to get rid of it yet, but is 5 units better than 80 units or 60 units? So we're doing the exact same thing. It's just we haven't figured out how to plumb get rid of the insulin yet. Okay, any quick questions?
We'll take some questions from the audience, and then we'll take the questions via YouTube and Zoom as well.
If a person who has diabetes is on medication, is the program going to work as well with the medication, or they have to stop the medication?
Good question. So what you're going to do, and thank you, I missed a very, very important component here. Thank you very much. I would have been, would not have been good if I had not mentioned this. As they start doing this, the glucose is going to start coming down. Let's say they've got a fasting in the morning of 180, 190. Or maybe even because of the medication, they have it at 120, 115. As that blood sugar comes down, they're going to want to reduce the amount of medication. But here's what you do. You call your doc. And you say, Doc, I'm on the Duke diet. I'm eating better. I'm exercising. I'm walking. I'm drinking water. And I'm seeing a huge benefit here. And this is where my blood sugar's going. Tell me what I need to do. Most physicians, would you agree, are going to say, they don't want you down to 50 or 40. They're going to tell you to cut back. And so you're actually going to teach your physician about this program by just watching your numbers coming down. But work with your physician on how to reduce those numbers if you're not comfortable how to do a sliding scale. Another question. Thank you for asking that. That's a very important question.
Somebody online on Zoom is asking, husband is very resistant to any change. I pray, but I'm ready to give up. Is there anything I can do?
Pray. Be an example. There's a lot of people who come to us whose husbands or wives are not willing to change. And you may say, oh, that's terrible, awful. But that's a good thing. Because God does not force us to do things. Is that true? Does God not force us? He doesn't. It's a good thing in the fact that that's the way God has, the way He has it. He doesn't force us to do things. We have an ability for free will. The bad thing is when they make bad decisions. And so what you have to do is pray without ceasing. Maybe fast. And be an example. Be that loving spouse. Maybe you need to start eating out of 2 different pots. I have people tell me, well, I can't eat that way because my husband won't eat that way. Are you going to let him kill you too? No. I had a guy come to me, and it was a brother and a brother-in-law. The brother was a physician. He's a podiatrist. Do you think a podiatrist sees a lot of diabetes? Yeah. He had diabetes. And in 10 days after being with us, his glucose was normal. His brother-in-law had heart disease. And his numbers were so much better just in 10 days. I'm on the way to Reagan Airport to take him to fly back to Ohio. I asked the pediatrician, I said, Doc, what are you going to do? He says, I'm going to teach my patients how to do this. 6 months later, I'm checking, see how folks are doing. And I called the physician, and he says, oh, I'm doing great. He says, I'm doing so good. Because he told me when he got home, he's going to tell his wife, this is the way I'm going to start eating. You can do whatever you want, but I'm going to start eating this way. So I said, your brother-in-law, I haven't been able to get a hold of him. Your sister's husband. How's he doing? He died. What happened? He was doing so much better. He said, well, he went home and told my sister this is the way he's going to start eating. And my sister told him, ain't the way you're going to eat at this house. This is how I fix food. And he died because she wasn't willing to change the cooking. Well, he needs to start doing his own cooking. So if you have a person who won't make a change, you make the change. Be an example. Pray. But again, remember, God does not force us. He allows a free will. Any other questions? No more questions? Oh, we got one.
Actually, it's not a question.
Yes.
I was just going to mention, and I wanted to see if you are aware of this. When you do the tapping, usually it's to increase the lymphatic circulation also.
Yes,
it's like
absolutely.
You increase the lymphatic drainage.
Exactly. It also increases the lymphatic drainage, which when you exercise, you're doing 2 things. Major things. You're increasing blood flow, but you're turning on the pumps that turn on the lymphatic system. It the sewer system to the body. So the doctor's exactly right. You're getting the benefit of exercise by both increasing circulation, microcirculation, and lymphatic flow. Thank you. Yes, that's exactly right.
The tapping, you should do it from
Yes,
the distal proximal feet up towards your torso.
yes.
And-
Come this way.
Yes.
That's right. Move it towards the heart. That's exactly right. Any other questions? Okay, shall we do cardiovascular? Okay, let's stand up, and I have a song for you to sing. How many of y'all have ever heard the song, "A Merry Heart Doeth Good Like a Medicine"? Any of y'all? You've heard it. Okay, you can help me sing it. Y'all, okay, back there. Good. I think I lost it again. Am I back on yet? Okay, good. Okay. Be careful with my sound, y'all. You might have to turn my sound down. Okay, here's how it goes. A merry heart. We're going to sing it twice, and the second time you'll know. A merry heart doeth good like a medicine. Like a medicine is a merry heart. But a broken spirit dry up the bones. A merry heart doeth good like a medicine. Okay, we're going to do it a little faster. Normally I have folks jog, but we're not going to do that here. A merry heart doeth good like a medicine. Like a medicine is a merry heart. But a broken spirit dry up the bones. A merry heart doeth good like a medicine. All right, you can sit down. I was in New York, just above the city, at a place called Camp Berkshire. You've been to Camp Berkshire before? A time that it was in 2008. Richard Marker had asked us to come up there and do a program on health. Pardon? Yes? Okay. So we were in between lectures. We would sing this song to get people to come back in. And there was a lady about, maybe 3/4 of the way back on this side. She stood up and she said, "I need to tell y'all something." Now, these are medical people out of New York City that had come. She said, "I'm a physician, and my specialty is the bone marrow." And she said, "That's all I deal with." And she said, "When we are happy, the bone marrow produces a chemical that improves the immune system." But she says, if we're not happy, the bone marrow does not produce this chemical that builds the immune system. Isn't it? A merry heart doeth good like a medicine, but dry. So let's talk about cardiovascular disease. The program that Kempner put together at Duke was actually developed not for diabetes at first. It was developed for cardiovascular disease. He first developed it for malignant hypertension. And he found that it not only helped malignant hypertension, but it actually became probably the most effective reversal of cardiovascular disease diets in the world. How many of y'all know John McDougall or know of John McDougall? McDougall says the rice diet fixes everything. My friend the surgeon in Washington, D.C. says the brown rice diet fixes everything. It's amazing how well that diet just provides the body the nutrients it needs to be able to help the body to recuperate in that restorative mode. And so then Kempner found not only did it help reverse hypertension and heart disease, but it also helped to reverse diabetes, type 2. He also found that it was significant in reversing renal failure. And it is. It's amazing for reversing renal failure. So what do we do? So we do the same diet that we just talked about, the same program, but we may add some extra things. The first one, let's talk about cholesterol. My cholesterol used to be 288. And the guys at work said I was genetically predisposed. I needed to go on a statin. And I didn't want to go on a statin because statins have a lot of problems. And so I went on a no added salt. I thought like hypertension, you do a no added salt diet. I did a no added cholesterol diet. So when I quit eating cholesterol, my cholesterol went from 288 to 104. Now you may think, well, you quit eating all that meat. No, I'd already quit eating the meat. I quit eating meat at 16 at a stockyard. I'd seen working, with dairy cattle that there was a problem. I mean, if we had a sick cow, you didn't go bury it, especially in the mountains. You didn't. It's hard to dig a hole big enough to put a cow in. I mean, it's hard enough to dig a hole to put a fence post in. So if you had a sick cow, you found a stockyard open and went and sold the cow if you couldn't fix the cow. And the meat packing house would buy it and feed it to somebody who wanted to eat meat. And so I just saw so much contaminated, diseased meat going through the meat packing house, or the stockyard. I quit eating meat at 16. But I kept doing the dairy. Remember, I started out on a dairy farm. My cholesterol was 288. When I quit doing dairy, my cholesterol went to 104. Now, you may say, well, how do you know? If you say to go on a no added cholesterol diet, quit eating cholesterol, how do you know what has cholesterol? How do you know what food has cholesterol? If it comes from an animal. Yeah, if it's got a mama. If it's got a mama, it's got cholesterol. So, does an apple have a mama? No. Does broccoli have a mama? No. Does pasta have a mama? Depends on what's on it. Yeah. Has it got cheese, real cheese on it from a cow or from a goat? Yeah, it's got cholesterol. And so if you go on a total animal-free diet, but we've learned since there's some other things that also affect cholesterol. Who's read any of, let's see here, Dr. William Davis. Dr. William Davis, a cardiologist. He wrote the book called Wheat Belly. Anybody read Wheat Belly? Yes. Pardon?
I saw the book.
Yes. He's a cardiologist. He's been studying wheat in America since 1990. So we're looking at 30 years, almost 31 years. He found that the American wheat increases LDL, the bad cholesterol. What's the difference in American wheat and European wheat? I have a friend who had a patient who was very sensitive to wheat. She was from England. She went home, and she was able, for a whole month, she could eat cakes and cookies and pies and everything in England. She came back home to East Tennessee, and she had some wheat, and she ended up in the emergency room. The next week after his wife told me this, I went to a seminar, and the guy was from England. I said, what's going on here? He said, in England, it is illegal to super hybridize wheat. And in England, it's illegal to use Roundup. Now, recently, I was in Montana. Does anybody know how tall wheat grows? Yeah, somewhere around here. Well, I left where I was speaking and walked across the street, and there was a field that had a grain growing that was this tall, literally 1 foot tall. And I went back over and I said, what is that growing over there? And they said, it's wheat. I said, wheat? Why? They said, we've super hybridized it so it grows shorter, so it doesn't blow over in the prairie winds. And so now it's only 1 foot tall. The original wheat had 14 to 16 chromosomes. This wheat has 42 chromosomes. The other thing that happens is right before it's harvested, they spray Roundup on it. And I asked these farmers in Minnesota, you spray Roundup on this? Oh, yeah. Now, who's ever grown a garden? Anybody ever grown a garden? Okay. So, what did you grow in your garden?
Tomatoes, cucumbers, peppers,
Peas?
no.
Oh, But tomatoes, okay? So you decide tomorrow I'm going to put up tomatoes. So tonight you out there and with a sprayer and you spray it all with Roundup, all your tomatoes. And then tomorrow you go out there and pick your tomatoes and feed it to your family, do you? No way. No way. But that's what we're doing when we eat American wheat. It's been sprayed with Roundup. Why are we having the gastrointestinal problems? Why are we having the thyroid problems? So I have found that people who go online and they can go to Amazon and they can look up wheat like jovial wheat, and they buy this wheat out of Europe, out of Italy and Hungary or wherever. Italy. Einkorn out of Italy. That's where we get it, is from Italy. And it's fine. The people who are having gluten intolerance can eat that because it's only 14 chromosomes. And be careful with the American einkorn. I've had people send me American einkorn, and I've sent it to UT, University of Tennessee at Knoxville, to the Department of Agriculture to test it. And though it's einkorn, it's cross-pollinated and it has 42 chromosomes. So be careful just because it says einkorn. The wheat we're talking about here, the jovial, it's grown, packaged, and comes to America and hasn't been contaminated. So you can increase the cholesterol by American wheat, by raising the LDL. Another thing that we found is that cashews can increase cholesterol. And what we found was cashews lower HDL. And we were noticing that our HDL levels were low, were going down with our patients, more than other places like ours as we benchmarked. And so we're trying to figure out, and it was a Filipino physician of ours said, as we kept looking at it, she says, y'all use a lot of cashews that you're teaching patients how to make cashew cream, cashew gravy, cashew. And we were every day making some nice cashew dish and whatever, teaching them so it was nice and creamy and rich. It's not that cashews are a problem. It's the volume by which we were using it. So I went to dietary and I said, let's quit using cashews. And boom, the HDLs stayed. Now, if you see total cholesterol dropping, it's not uncommon to see total HDL maybe drop because you've got cholesterol drop, but not like we were seeing it drop. When we cut out the cashews, the HDLs did fine. See, HDLs are the good cholesterol. They're like the cops. And they go out to the bad guys, the LDLs, put handcuffs on them and carry them to jail, to the liver. And so you need a lot of cops. And if you don't have enough, they don't get rid. That's a bad word to say here in Chicago. But anyway, so if you do cashews, you want to use a little. About 6 months later, I saw our HDL starting to drop on the labs. And I went to ask the dietary, are you using cashews again? And it was like a person who got their hand caught in a cookie jar. How did you know? And all the excuses, but it tastes so much better and whatever. How did you know? I said, the labs told me. And so I said, it's obvious we can't manage it. What we had done, we had gone from using cashews to almonds. If you do just in moderation, it's fine. But if you do a lot of cashews, it can actually lower the HDL. That can have an inverse raising of the LDL. So the best way to lower cholesterol is just don't eat cholesterol. Yes, there's things like red yeast rice. There's things like Cholesterol Pro, which is a fruit that can help to lower it. Works very well. But which actually Cholesterol Pro is just made here in Chicago. Yeah, and I forgot the name of the little town, but it's made in Chicago. Cholesterol Pro is, but or it's put together. So that's how we lower cholesterol. Triglycerides. Triglycerides can be eating sugar. It can be stress. It can be eating a lot of oil. It can be eating meat. There's a number of things that can cause high triglycerides. But I find that if that person goes on that whole food plant-based diet, they get their sleep, they drink their water, they get their exercise. One, the sugar's not going to be there because they're not eating sugar, refined sugar. The stress is going to hopefully come down because they're using those laws of health and trusting God. They're not going to be eating the meat and the oils. They've cut back on the oils. I had a girl come in one day, a family come in, and we did a class. She was from Colombia, and her triglycerides were out the roof. And she was a young girl, maybe 13, 14 years old. Parents were whole food, plant-based diet, homeschooled. And the mama said, why is her triglycerides so high? I said, does she eat sugar? Oh, no, we don't do sugar. Does she have a lot of stress? No. I know you don't eat meat because you're a whole food plant-based. Does she do oil? And the mama goes, that's it. She said, have you ever found men that's not enough salt, and even though, ladies, you put what you thought was enough salt, they just go ahead and put a whole bunch more salt on it? Well, I think I lost, yep, there we go. What this little girl did was when she'd sit down at a meal, she would take, I think I'm going in and out here. She would take a bottle of olive oil. There you go, are we okay now? She would take a bottle of olive oil and just pour it on everything. And I said, okay, we were doing, I think we did I don't remember how many week program we were doing back then, but I said until the end of the program, no oil at all, except if your mama puts a little in something. At the end of the program, we drew her labs again, her triglycerides were fine. And she was only using olive oil. But there's something called, that we talked about last night, it's called making the right decision, and that's temperance. Now, I used to think it was moderation in all things. And then I had kids. Is moderation in cocaine okay in your house? Moderation in moonshine? No. It's moderation in the good stuff, total abstinence in the bad stuff. So for triglycerides, you're looking at your sugars, you're looking at your stress, you're looking at your oils, you're looking at your meat. Those are 4 big ones right there. There's others, but those are 4 big ones. What about ejection fraction? Ejection fraction. Ejection fraction is only a fraction. It's how much blood is coming into the left ventricle versus how much, the percentage that is leaving the ventricle. Be careful, because you only want to calculate how much is going out the aorta. Unfortunately, sometimes they count how much you're losing through a valve leak. But how do you increase the ejection fraction? Ejection fraction, you're looking at how well that left ventricle is squeezing. Hawthorne berry works very well. I had a man who came in, and all he used was hawthorne berry. And he went from an ejection fraction of 15 to 55. That's all he would do. I had a lady come in, her ejection fraction was 18, and she went to 65. And she did the Duke diet and hawthorne berry and CoQ10. And the chief cardiologist at University of Tennessee finally said, what are you doing? She says, have you ever heard of Duke University? I'm doing their program. And still today at UT, they're doing that, parts of that program, because it's so successful of helping that heart function, the Duke diet. But hawthorne berry does help significantly if it's electrical issues or the strength, that muscle strength. If it's a valve issue, it's another issue. Any other cardiac issues? Congestive heart failure. It's another one out there. If you're wanting to use a good diuretic, what's a good diuretic? My favorite is pardon? Vitamin C? It may be. I've used the, off again? I like dandelion. And I found dandelion root works better. Some say dandelion leaf works better. But dandelion works as an excellent diuretic. Also, hawthorn berry is good. The CoQ10, L-arginine, those are all good to help that heart function. But go back to the lifestyle. The fuel, the Duke diet. Remember, the Duke diet is the best reversal of cardiovascular disease diet out there. The exercise is good as long as a person has the ability to exercise. Proper hydration. And with CHF, you don't want to load it down with too much at once. You don't want to load it with too much food at once. And so again, that sipping, where we just do that sipping throughout the time. And I'm about right here. I'm about at 2 hours, and I'm almost done. You want to do one of these bottles every 2 hours. If you do exercise, intermittent training seems to be a better exercise. Instead of constant training, it's where you go fast for 3 minutes, slow for 1 minute. Fast for 3 minutes, slow for 1 minute. You can take 220 minus your age, and then do a certain percentage of it, say 65% of it, and then you go 5 beats above and 5 beats below, and that's your target range between those two amounts. But to make it easy, okay, great, we're good. The easiest is just to do 3 minutes fast, 1 minute slow. 3 minutes fast, 1 minute slow, whether you're walking, cycling, running, rowing, swimming. But if a person doesn't have that good of their heart function isn't that good, don't push it too hard. Just do what they can do within their ability on the exercise. Sleep is also very, very important for heart disease, for congestive heart failure, any heart disease. It's for everything. It's really cool. How many of y'all are teachers? Anybody ever been a teacher? Anybody a teacher? Remember when we take a test and the teacher would clip out on the punch holes into this master, and they'd lay the student's test down and lay it down, and where you hadn't filled in, they would put the red mark. Remember that? The master is real simple. What's the fuel? What are they eating? Are they getting exercise? Adequate exercise. Cardiovascular exercise and resistant exercise. A mini trampoline is a great source of exercise. Walking is a great source of exercise. And then weight-bearing exercise is very, very important, or strengthening exercise, resistant exercise. Water, are they drinking adequate water? But then what else are they drinking? Are they drinking Coca-Cola? Are they drinking moonshine? Are they drinking sweet tea? The next one, are they getting sunshine? As we talked last night, the darker the pigmentation of the skin, the more sunshine you need. Sunshine is important because it converts, as the ultraviolet light hits the skin, it converts the cholesterol, which over 50% of your cholesterol is just under your skin. And it converts it into melanin. The melanin then turns into vitamin D. But that's not the only big thing. Also sunshine, as the sunshine comes in through the iris of the eye, the ultraviolet light, when you eat flaxseed, it converts the tryptophan that's in the flaxseed into serotonin. So what happens as sunshine comes into the eye, the pineal gland converts the tryptophan into serotonin. Now, there was a study, in Africa, there was an army that got SAD. Do y'all know what SAD is? That seasonal disorder? That they get up north? Pardon? Seasonal affective disorder, where a person, they get real depressed, they get suicidal, especially in Minnesota, Canada, in the wintertime. Well, because of the lack of sunshine. Well, this army in Africa gets SAD. How? There's a lot of sunshine in Africa. What they found was they had put in a new uniform policy that everybody had to wear what when outside? Sunglasses. And so when they took the sunglasses off, boom, ultraviolet light could come into the eyes, and then the pineal gland could be stimulated to convert the tryptophan into serotonin, and the SAD went away. Isn't that cool? But it doesn't stop there. If you eat a light supper to no supper, and if you go to bed when it gets dark, then what happens is your pineal gland then converts serotonin to melatonin to help you sleep. So sunshine's important. And also exercise physiologists, I've seen numerous reports, different ones say, exercising outside is worth 10 times the effect of exercising inside. You've got your fresh air. You've got your sunshine. You've got the green grass, the blue sky, which are calming. There's so many things that outside helps with exercising. The next one is temperance, and that's just making the right decisions. You know, choosing what you're eating, what you're drinking, but also not just that. It's choosing what conversations you get involved in. There's some conversations that are pretty piranha, pretty mean, that aren't good for your health or the health of others. It could be music that you're listening to. What television programs are you watching? Can that affect your health? Absolutely. So that's temperance, making the right decisions. Fresh air, but it's not just breathing fresh air that's not polluted. It's also having diaphragmatic breathing. How did you breathe when, y'all ladies, when you had your children? Remember their stomachs would go up and down? Remember y'all when you anybody take a wind instrument or take voice? Any of y'all? They taught us to breathe. I remember I had a music teacher that every new person that came into the choir, he would lay them down, put a songbook on their stomach, and tell them to breathe until the book went up and down. And then go back to the dormitory room and learn to breathe that way. Diaphragmatic breathing. We got people breathing like chihuahuas. And it's not healthy. I mean, as it is, we don't expel 100% of the oxygen out. We don't plumb fill the lungs. It's just not how it works. But if you're breathing like a chihuahua, it's even less good air exchange that we're getting. And it's not just getting air in, it's getting the carbon dioxide out also. And diaphragmatic breathing makes a big difference. Rest, and we talked about that a lot this weekend. Getting proper rest is so important, cardiac-wise and just in general health. But the most important, as people leave, and I talk to them, as y'all listeners out there are listening today from Newport or from Greenville or wherever you are on our Facebook, I always ask them, don't forget the most important thing, prayer. It's prayer is the power. It's not the nutrition. It's not the exercise. It's not the water. It is God blessing those things. Now, we have a responsibility. Let's say Anna decides she's never going to eat again, and she tells her husband, I'm not going to eat again. God's just going to keep me alive. God's going to say, Anna, I gave you two things. I gave you a brain and I gave you food, and I used both of them. You know what I'm saying? We have a responsibility. It's a working responsibility with God. Any questions on cardiovascular?
So you talked about triglycerides, right? Triglycerides, which will increase the cholesterol. But brown rice, does it have triglycerides? Is it good for when a person has cholesterol?
The brown rice?
Yes.
And its effect. Kempner found that the brown rice has a chemical in it called brown rice bran. And the brown rice bran actually improves cardiac function. Now, when Mary Lou makes her brown rice, it's yellow. And what she'll do is she will Let me give you her recipe. Y'all want a recipe? I'll give you a recipe. This is how she makes brown rice. See if I can find it here real quick for you. Here it is. Are you ready? 1 cup soaked overnight, brown rice that is. 1 cup of brown rice soaked overnight. 2.5 cups of water. 1/4 of a teaspoon of turmeric. 1/4 of a cup of sliced green onions, scallions. 1/4 of a cup of chopped cilantro. Now, did y'all live in South America? Did y'all live in South America any? Y'all like cilantro down there, right? Yes. Our Colombian friends and Venezuelan friends taught us to like cilantro. Cook in the rice cooker as designated on settings on the cooker or on top of the stove for approximately 40 minutes. 1 cup of brown rice soaked overnight. Now, when you soak brown rice overnight, this is cool. It increases the GABA, and that's good for the brain. 2.5 cups of water. 1/4 of a cup of turmeric. 1/4 of a cup of sliced scallions or green onions. 1/4 of a cup of chopped cilantro. And then cook it either rice cooker setting or 40 minutes approximately on the stove. But what about the arsenic? So I called Duke. Now, Duke's been doing this since 1934. You'd think if there's an arsenic killing off a bunch of people, Duke would know. At Duke, when I went to visit Duke and spent time with them, learning this protocol, they had over 100 patients. They'll run over 100 patients at any given day doing this protocol. And Duke said they never found any challenges with the arsenic. Yes, Doc?
Yes, I was going to ask, can we substitute the brown rice for with wild rice or quinoa?
Absolutely. And actually, you may have some patients of yours that have gout. We have found some patients with gout. The brown rice increases the uric acid. So we use the quinoa. Quinoa has more protein, but it doesn't.
Complex
Pardon?
protein. It's a complex protein.
Yes,
right?
but it doesn't have the rice bran, and so we're missing that component. But we do, quinoa is the exact perfect thing that we do.
What about wild rice?
Wild rice is fine. You can, as I tell folks, not just plum wild rice only, they can mix it in with the brown rice. Yes.
The first time he said turmeric, he said
Can we
a quarter
identify
teaspoon.
the first sign of diabetes or heart disease?
The
Easily?
first sign of diabetes or heart disease.
Yes.
For diabetes, you look at frequent urination. That's one big sign, frequent urination. They may be tired, drinking a lot of water. Yes, drinking a lot of water. Thirst and urination. Go ahead, Doc. Go ahead with the mic.
Increased urination, thirsty, tiredness, and loss of appetite too. Or you can go to the other extreme where you would eat a lot but not gain and still lose weight, and that can be a sign of diabetes also. But usually with diabetes, when you see the signs, that means you had the disease for a while already. So that's the only downside to diabetes. When you are diagnosed, you already had it for like at least 10 years, right?
Yes. So that's on diabetes. That's what we look at. Then there's things out there they do, you know. One of the questions is, do you have family that have it? Now, let's look at that one. What are the three causes that I have found for type 2 diabetes? The cell's too large. There's too much fat and there's too much inflammation. So let's say mama had it and grandma had it. Does that mean you're going to have it? What's the cause? If you got big cells like mama's got and grandma's got, good chance you're going to have it. But if you keep your ideal body weight and you have good lifestyle, then you don't have to have it. See, when they told me I was genetically predisposed for high cholesterol, because my daddy had it, my granddaddy had it, but when I changed my lifestyle, my food, I quit eating cholesterol, it went to 104. Was that genetics? No, that was I was lifestyle predisposed. Now, I will have physicians argue with me on this point till the cows come home. Yet a kindergartner could tell me, mister, this is how it happens. Your granddaddy smokes and he gets lung cancer. Your daddy smokes and he gets lung cancer. You smoke and you get lung cancer. Is that genetically predisposed? I have had medical doctors argue with me, yes. I'll have a kindergartner tell me, oh, mister, that's because you're smoking. Would you agree? So, yes, there is some genetics out there. There's no question. Genetics loads the gun, but lifestyle pulls the trigger. But if your mama is like this with big cells and your grandma's like this with big cells, it's just because you have the same lifestyle maybe as mama and grandma. So a lot of times they'll look at it. Does that mean you have a propensity? Yes, because maybe you have the same tendencies because that's what you learned from them, lifestyle. But then they also may ask, what is your weight? You know, and they start asking some questions there to see if you're. I have people come in and I say, do you have diabetes? Well, not yet, but they say I'm prone to. Well, yeah, you're prone to. And so you need to shrink that cell down. For cardiovascular, what are some of the signs? It can be, depending on what kind, it can be shortness of breath. It could be, you could have swelling. You could have some edema. It could be that you just can't do what you normally used to do. It may be you have angina. Angina is heart pain. There's 3 kinds of muscles in the body. The heart's a totally different muscle of its own. And the heart muscle just likes to scream when it doesn't get enough blood flow. And God made it that way. What happens is, I got this friend. Who was here last night? Did I show you the car last night, the yellow car? Did you see that car? Remember it had a 1-inch gas line? Well, let's say when it went to Mr. Petty's, instead of going from a 3/4-inch gas line to a 1-inch gas line, his fellows made a mistake and put a Pinto gas line on it. Remember the little Pinto cars? Now this car has 1,500 horsepower. It runs on 2 fuel pumps, and it has a 1-inch gas line. You put a Pinto gas line, it may run on idle, but you step on it, what's it going to do? It's going to stall. What happens is when you have clogged arteries or atherosclerosis, you don't have as big of a gas line. And when you get excited or you exercise, you don't have enough volume going to the heart. And when you don't have enough volume of blood going to the heart, then your heart screams, called pain or angina. And it makes you stop so you don't cause your heart to then possibly have part of it dying because you don't have adequate blood flow. Doc, anything else there on signs of heart disease that they can tell that they may have heart disease?
Excuse me?
Other things that may show they have heart disease besides the shortness of breath and the edema and the angina?
Sometimes it can be headaches, dizziness. That can be a sign of the high blood pressure.
Mm-hmm.
Blurry vision. That's another sign of the high blood pressure. But the major ones with shortness of breath, chest pain, angina, like even on rest, exertion, like exercise, these are the ones that show that it's a problem directly to the heart.
Yes.
Or it can be lung related also.
Yes.
When you have shortness of breath, That's
You could have
another
some
thing.
wheezing, you can have some crackles, you can have,
Yes, which can be associated with asthma or COPD. But usually these are major things you go to the doctor for. You don't want to wait. Because
Yeah.
it can be lung, it can be the heart, it can be even a heart attack, we don't know. But these are kind of the major ones to look for. And sometimes we even had patients, especially women. Women are so different. We are so different. God built us like men, but more sensitive. With us, we can have like a sign of tiredness or some pain in your stomach
or on this side.
in the back of your heart or in the back or on the right side
Yes.
of your chest, and you might have a heart attack. So with women, it's slightly different than men. How we can, once we go into 50s, our estrogen decreases, so we are more prone to heart disease and high blood pressure. But that's true, yes. Actually, estrogen protects us from a lot of diseases. And once we turn 50 or we go into menopause, we start developing osteoporosis and heart disease and gastric disease and gastroenterological disease. So there are a lot of things.
I'm
But I
glad,
think these are the major ones for heart.
yes, I'm glad you mentioned hypertension. I forgot to mention hypertension. When I look at,
You did, actually. You said malignant
oh, okay, yes, malignant hypertension.
Which you know that 90% is unknown cause, still, even in our days.
Yes. When we look at hypertension, one of the biggest causes of hypertension is stress. Stress raises cortisol, stress lowers potassium, blood pressure goes up. Dehydration. When you're dehydrated, the blood is more prone to be thicker and stickier. When you're dehydrated, you don't have as much water going to the brain, and the brain's more prone to stress. Therefore, you go back to number one. Your kidneys don't run as well. It's kind of, y'all have any hydro dams around here? Y'all know what a hydroelectric dam is? Y'all know what those are? It's a dam that holds water back, and water goes through the turbines and it generates electricity. The more water goes through, the more electricity it generates. Well, your kidneys need water, and the kidneys are the switches to the blood pressure. And if you don't have enough water, the kidneys don't work as efficient, and you're more prone to hypertension. If you also, it's through urination that you get rid of sodium. And if you're dehydrated, your brain goes, hypothalamus goes, hey, you're in a drought. Don't urinate as much because hold the dam. And so it's through urination you get rid of sodium. And so if you're not drinking enough, then you're not flushing out the sodium like you need to. Sodium can cause hypertension. And I just learned that sea salt has 7 times the negative effect on your body that the Himalayan salt does. I was disappointed to hear that because I like sea salt. But Himalayan is much, much healthier for the body than the sea salt. So those are things. Or it could be because of your kidney function. It may be, or let me go back, overweight. We know that overweight can cause high blood pressure. There's a lot of studies on that. And then also it could be you have renal issues, the renal function. You have renal function problems. And again, the kidneys are the switches for the blood pressure. It could be that you have clogged arteries, atherosclerosis. If you've got, let's say you're going to go out and wash the car and you want more pressure, what do? You put a tip on the end to make it smaller to get more pressure. Well, when you make the pressure, when you make the lumen, the hole smaller, the pressure's going to go up. Or maybe you have hardening of the arteries or arteriosclerosis. If you have a pipe that every time a pump pumps and the pipe has flexibility, then your pressure won't be as much as if you have a rigid pipe and it can't flex. And so that can raise blood pressure. Or you could have a heart issue. There's a number of things that can cause hypertension, but those are some major ones. Yes?
Do you use any type of cooking oil in your kitchen?
Mary Lou uses a little bit of olive oil. Not much. Yeah, she's really cut back on the oil. We feel better. Actually, we just feel better. We feel a lot better when we eat raw. Yes, she cooks. She's a great cook and she loves to cook, but both of us feel better when we just eat plumb raw. Yes, ma'am.
You usually use water when you
Yes.
steam, right?
That's right. Mary Louise uses water a lot of times, yeah.
I do the same thing.
That's right. She'll put it in the skillet and use some water. You can do a wok. You can use water. That's exactly right.
I usually use water. What about tahini? Do you use tahini or
She-
sesame seeds?
She does use a little tahini, yes.
But the raw one, right?
Just I don't know, it's just called tahini in a container. I don't know if it's raw or not.
Yes,
It's,
yes.
it's just tahini. I don't know why they don't call it sesame butter, but it's just tahini.
Yes, it's made from sesame seeds.
Yes, sesame seeds, yeah.
So you use that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
What about coconut oil?
That's a good question. You know, I've had such a hard time with coconut oil. You know, coconut oil has such a low PS ratio, like 0.4 or something like that. And for years, we used to say, we can't do, you know, because we want a PS ratio of at least 2 from a cardiac standpoint. You know, your black walnuts are your highest in nuts. And then you've got your English walnuts and your almonds and your pecans and those things. But under 2, you got to be cautious. It's way down there. But your coconut oil is a medium chain oil. And so we've been looking at that coconut oil now for over 20 years. And the naysayers said, you know, well, you just wait. Folks are going to be dropping off dying from that coconut oil pretty soon. I don't know that they are. Maybe you've seen some research on it. What do you think, Doc? Again, we're cautious on the oil. We're still cautious on the oil. As a firefighter, I warn you about coconut oil. It has a lower flash point, and so it can catch on fire a lot faster than other oils. So be careful. You can set your kitchen on fire a lot
Yes, and
faster with coconut oil.
because of that, once you cook it, it's not healthy. But what I noticed and learning from other people and patients also, a lot of them cannot tolerate the coconut oil. And I think because of the very high fat content, it's not as much the sugar, it's the fat content, and because it's a medium chain triglyceride, I think it's harder for our digestive system to digest it. Digestive system too.
Yes. I mean, if you go to Esselstyn, you go to Campbell, you go to Predican, you go to those guys, and they're gonna be really light on the oil. Or no, actually, those guys are no oil guys. They don't do oil. And so, you know what your best oil is? Eat you an avocado. Eat you some olives. That's your best oil. It really is. Is there any other questions? You got some up here?
There's, if nobody has any more questions, this will be the last one. Somebody asks, what causes tricuspid, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, tricuspid heart valve disease and how to treat it?
Okay. So the tricuspid is over between the left atrium, the right atrium and the right ventricle. And am I correct? You've got your bicuspid over here, which is the mitral. You've got your tricuspid over here. I'm trying to think now. You're pushing me there. I'm better on the other side than I am on the right side. Help me out, Doc.
What was the question?
The question is, what causes tricuspid valve failure? Is that correct?
Tricuspid valve
And how to treat it, yes.
disease or failure? Oh, it's usually.
What is the cause of failure of the tricuspid valve?
Usually it has to do with the lung. It's lung disease. And then it can be congestive heart failure, which is due to, it can be left heart disease also, like bicuspid valve disease. If it's not treated, can cause damage to the right side of the heart. Anytime you see damage to the right side of the heart is due to the left side or the lungs, because the blood, it just backs up, goes back into the heart.
Now, treatment-wise, if it's calcification, K2 has been shown to reduce valvular calcification. MSM is good to reduce inflammation. Going on the Duke diet is good. Trying to think. Those are things that I would think right off. Yeah. Anything else?
Whole food plant diet, yes. But usually when you have the right side of the heart involved, you want to find out the cause.
Yes. You want
And you go from there.
Yeah, cure's in the cause.
Yes, yes. Yes, if we don't find the cause, then it's useless to give treatment. The treatment is not going to fix the cause.
That's
It's
correct.
just- we just treat symptoms,
That's
which
it.
as physician, we should not do that.
Correct.
We should look for the cause and treat it from there, once
Yes.
we identified it.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Are the questions only regarding diabetes and heart disease, or it could be something?
We can ask some others. We can go as long as you want to go.
No, my question is regarding how important is vitamin D to have?
Okay?
I recently read that vitamin D does not help at all immune system. Then I listened to the Dr. Wes Youngberg, who is very, very much into vitamin D. And so
I would have to agree with Youngberg. The science is behind what he says. There was a study that came out in March of this year that said an adequate vitamin D level is more effective fighting the flu than the flu shot. That's pretty substantial. Vitamin D does have a direct relationship with your level of vitamin D and your immune system. But it's not just for that. It's the American Lipidemic, I think it's Society, it's a group. They, I was listening to, do you ever listen to ReachMD? ReachMD, it's a great resource that physicians can get CMEs off of. And it was at their annual conference. And this lady came out, she's the assistant chairperson or president of the society. And she said there's a direct relationship also between the vitamin D and the HDL. The low vitamin D can pull HDL down. So vitamin D is important, yes, for brain function. It's important for immune system. We were talking the other night about with children. I've always had a challenge of why are boys more prone to autism than girls, 5 to 1. And Harvard found that when a child is young, that year old or year and a half, 2 years, they're developing serotonin. And not having enough serotonin can make them more prone to autism. They found that vitamin D helps to make the serotonin. If they're low in vitamin D, then the boy may not make enough serotonin and make him more prone to autism. The little girl has another hormone, and vitamin D is a hormone. The little girl has another hormone, which the boy has, but she has more of. But she has enough of it that can make the difference and increase the serotonin above what level of vitamin D she has, and that is estrogen. And so vitamin D is very important for many functions of the body. And again, it's not how much you take a day, it's what's the blood level. You know, the blood level says 30 to 100. There's plenty of docs out there say to do the minimum of what vitamin D needs to do, no less than 50. A lot of them will say you need 80 to 100 for that good, strong immune system. But then what do we think of vitamin D for? We think of vitamin D pulling the cholesterol out of the blood and putting it into the bones. I had a lady come in one day, and her physician had sent her to me for me to tell her what foods were high in calcium so she wouldn't eat it anymore. And I said, why? She says, my calcium's too high. I said, how did you determine that? She said, lab work. And that's what I figured. But I wanted to see the labs. I said, do you have the lab work? And she said, yes. And so she went out to the car and got it. And as I'm looking, I'm thinking, I hope he did a D. On the third page, there was her vitamin D. And it was like 8 or 12. I want to say 12 is what it was. Somewhere between 8 or 12. It was peanuts. It wasn't pulling her calcium out of her blood. Her problem was not she eats too much food with calcium. Her problem was she needs to increase her vitamin D to pull that calcium out. And calcium is the most important for our body. It's super, super important for the body to run. The number one mineral in our body is calcium. And our body has to have adequate calcium for so many different functions. And vitamin D helps to regulate that. Yes.
I've heard some say that drinking a glass of water before going to bed can prevent a person from getting stroke. But you also mentioned that sleep is a necessary element in treating the cholesterol. So drinking a glass of water will wake the person up in the middle of the night and he doesn't get the deep sleep. So how do you overcome
It's
these
a very
kinds
good
of
question. Cardiologists will tell you, yes, drink water before going to bed. Yes, drink water when you first get up in the morning. One cardiologist I heard say, he says, water is the best blood thinner there is. The problem is for a male or female can have problems. And if it causes sleep deprivation, that's a problem too. And so what you want to then try to do is to figure out, again, it's like driving that stick shift. What can you do to have the both work the best? It may mean you have to quit drinking water at 5 o'clock if you're going to bed at 9. Or it may mean that you have to drink just a little bit before going to bed, trying to figure that out. It may be because you're getting up because of, we don't want to say don't drink water at night because they're right. It does help to prevent a stroke or a heart attack. So why is it waking you up at night? Is it because you have prostate problems? And so let's address the problem, the prostate, and use things like Padiarco, black seed oil, saw palmetto, pumpkin seed, pygium. But I'm finding my favorite is probably more out towards the Padiarco and the black seed oil. Also, Duke University found in the early 90s that a person who has enlarged prostate, the first thing that they recommended was stop dairy, all dairy, because dairy has a propensity to enlarge the prostate. So find out why it's waking you up at night. Is it needing for frequent urination? Then is that because of prostate? And try to get rid of that problem so you can drink that water at night so you're less prone to have that stroke as the cardiologists tell you.
My question is about what type of vitamin D would you recommend? I stopped taking the vitamin D capsules and I'm using something on oil-based. It's like a drop. It's like 1,000 units. After doing my research, I realized that one gets absorbed in our body much better than if we actually take a capsule.
I agree with you. We moved from a pill to a drop. Ours has 4,000. I've got some that has 6,000. And you want it, as you said, mixed with an oil. That's important for absorption. K2 is important to take K2 to have better absorption of vitamin D. And then there's D2 and D3. D3 stays in the blood twice as long as D2. And people say, but D3 comes from animals. Yes, it does. But also you can get D3 from mushrooms and you can get it from plant vegetation, from seaweed, sea vegetables.
And then, because we are talking about vitamins, I remembered yesterday in your presentation, you talked about the vitamin C and how it has a very short half-life.
Yes.
Vitamin C is the best from rosehip, correct?
Vitamin C?
Yes, the best source is rosehip or
Rosehip?
yes.
That's a good source, yes.
Compared to if we get
Ascorbic acid
ascorbic acid, it doesn't
or
even
sodium
get absorbed.
ascorbate.
It doesn't even get absorbed in our system.
Yes.
It just gets eliminated.
And if we can, again, going back to, if we can eat the foods that are high in vitamin C in our diet, if we have that ability. We talked last night about using the strawberry caps and the kiwi and the oranges and things. If we can get it that way, that's the best. But there are times that we have to have the supplementation.
Even cranberries. But one problem with that, what I've been noticing for the past years, even if the patients eat very healthy, and even if they have a whole food plant-based diet, some of them, they do not digest it properly. And I think it has to do with the fact that a lot of the foods we are eating, they are genetically modified. And that's why they are still deficient in vitamin C, in zinc, in magnesium,
Absolutely.
in spite of eating very healthy.
And the doc brings a very important point. It's a whole orchestra of lifestyle. It's not just the fuel. It's It's the whole thing, because if you're eating stressed, then you're not having proper digestion. If you're drinking with your meals, then you're not having proper digestion. If you are eating foods that don't have adequate enzymes in it. I really debated the issue about, we don't need digestive enzymes because, our fruits and vegetables have adequate enzymes. And then I was wrong. There's times we need digestive enzymes.
So you would recommend them, right? The digestive enzymes?
Yes.
I've been using them for
I
the
think they're very important.
past 5 years, and I think so too.
I see personally, and as I work with people, a huge benefit using digestive enzymes. Should we have to? No. But
No.
going back to what you just said, the deterioration in our food today due to hybridization, soil erosion,
Yes.
all the problems that we have, then we're having to do some supplementation, unfortunately.
And usually they should be plant-based.
Yes, absolutely, they need to be plant-based. Yes,
Thank you.
yes, thank you. Can you recommend some? Digestive enzymes? There's different ones out there. One comes from Chicago. A great one comes right here out of Chicago. It's called Digest Ultimate by a company called Now, N-O-W. And it works very, very well for myself and for other folks.
I'm using Loomis enzyme. It's by Professor Loomis in
Okay.
Wisconsin, Madison, Wisconsin. He did the research on himself for 30 years, and they are pure, and I'm pretty impressed.
There's some really good digestive enzymes out there that do a really good job. And on the converse, there's some out there that just not good research.
No, yes, no. I had the opportunity to meet Professor Loomis, and I think he's doing an amazing job.
Excellent. Yeah, enzymes are extremely important to break the food down properly so that we can turn that from a macronutrient into a micronutrient so we have adequate absorption.
And with him, he focused on digestive enzymes, and then we have systemic enzymes, which are totally different,
Yes.
that are used for different other things. But he said it's very important to have a digestive enzyme because our digestion starts in the mouth.
Yes, that's exactly right. Any other questions? Okay. Is that it? Okay, guys.
Could you tell us what is going to be the message tomorrow?
Oh, y'all are going to have fun. Y'all don't want to miss tomorrow. Tomorrow is my favorite class, but it's my hardest class because when I was in Dallas one time, it went for 6 hours. And finally I said, guys, we might need to stop. There's just so much information. It's really fun. It's called Old Mountain Remedies. And what we do, we're going to look at how to make charcoal poultices, how to make castor oil packs, how to make mustard plasters, how to make extracts, how to make infusions and decoctions and cold teas and just all kinds of stuff we're going to learn how to make. And we'll also talk about, what do you do in case you have, like we said today, pink eye, or you have a strep throat, or just all kinds of stuff. How do you address a wound? What's a real good way to heal a wound? Even if the wound has osteomyelitis, how can we reverse those naturally? And we're going back to what our grandparents used. And I'll give you one little tip, a little taste of it. A number of years ago, I was teaching a class, and this was about 20 years ago, and there's a little lady, and I was teaching about pine sap. And there's a little lady back in the corner where that little fella's sitting right back there, and she raised her hand. Y'all, we got to listen to the folks in the audience. They have a lot of knowledge, especially if they're older. And she says, when I was a little girl in 1918, she says, my daddy was a nurse, and we were in Southern California. And he would take me and my brother from house to house as he treated patients with the Spanish flu. That got my ears. Here he's taking those children into the house with Spanish flu. The influenza. She says, when we got home at night, he'd take a pine knot and put it over a piece of, over a fire, and pine sap would drop out of the pine knot into a glass of water. And Daddy and my brother and I drank it, and we never got influenza. I said, how many drops, how much water? She goes, I don't know, I was a little girl. But we can learn so much, and we found that pine sap does actually raise the immune system. And when I went back home to East Tennessee, when I left the D.C. area, I was teaching this kind of thing. This little old lady, and another little old lady, they tell me, when we were kids, our grandmothers or our mothers would give us a piece of pine rosin about the size of a match head. That was the size that all of them would tell me. And this was before they had school buses. And as they walked to school, they would chew the pine rosin on the way to school, and they didn't get sick. So those little tips that we have are just real cool. And we're going to talk about those tomorrow.
Thank you, Walt, for today's presentation. We look forward to tomorrow's as well. Before we head out, just a quick announcement. You may know that Walt is traveling across the country and across the world voluntarily. He's doing all of these seminars for free. And you know, the ministry covers the cost for his travel and all the things like that. But if you would like to support his ministry and you enjoyed the message today and all the information he provided, we encourage you to leave a donation if you feel called to. There's going to be a box at the end of the hallway. Otherwise, a few more announcements. So tomorrow the presentation is at 10:30 in the morning, and we will have a Q&A at the end as well. And you can RSVP to that event and the future events that we will be hosting on our meetup group, meetup.com/ElmhurstSDA. And we will have another speaker next weekend. It'll be our last speaker of the year, Dr. Eddie Ramirez. He will be here for Friday night and Saturday as well. He'll have multiple lectures. Dr. Ramirez, if you haven't heard of him, he's a researcher. He's published multiple papers. I think it's like over 130 medical papers in the medical literature on different topics. And next weekend, he will be speaking about the emerging diseases on Friday, and then how to beat COVID. Is it right? Yeah, the best weapon against COVID. And the last one, but not least, how your microbiota influences your emotions. So he'll touch on the mental health and how your gut health is connected with your mental health, which is very important in the times we live in. It's a difficult time. So we encourage you to RSVP to those as well. And before you head out, there's also some free literature at the end. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your presence. For those watching online, we hope you were blessed, and we will see you hopefully tomorrow. Thank you.